Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way Show. I am your host, Trent Clark. I hope things are well for you today. Thank you for joining us on the Winners Find a Way Show. We got a special episode for you today. I am the CEO of Leadershipity and a serial entrepreneur, international speaker, having spoken over 17 countries, and probably those people know me as the author of Leading Winning Teams and, of course, as a three-time World Series coach. And so I have been in Major League Baseball and spent over 13 years in that space. And now super excited about this podcast, what we're doing here, as well as having just fabulous guests on our show. You know, obviously the 1% of folks that have done things in their lives, entrepreneurs, professional athletes. And today is no different. Today, I welcome my good friend, Ramiro Saborio. Ramiro, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. I'm awesome. You know what?
Yeah.
I'm a huge baseball fan.
Yeah. So yeah, and I love the fact like Ramiro is. You'll hear a little accent there, and Ramiro is from and hails from the great country of Nicaragua. And Ramiro and I have a great relationship. Go back about 3 years. Been EO members, both of us, for a long time. And as an entrepreneur, Ramiro set this thing on fire back in 2005, starting with co-founding de la Isla, which provides all sorts of seafood and supply chain in this space, which is just incredible. He's going to tell Morris about that, and I can't wait to hear. But you're also, man, you're so much more. You're a coach. You're a triathlete. You've done Ironmans. You've done marathons, man. You can see that gorgeous bike back there. You know, not afraid to get on that puppy. And you're a family guy, you know, father of two, married to your high school sweetheart of 17 years. And tell them real quick, Ramiro, as they want to reach out to you, where they can find you.
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media guy, but I'm on LinkedIn. Instagram, Facebook. But I'm not a huge social media guy. But I am on LinkedIn. I publish some of the articles I write there. I've been writing for the last year, so every month and a half, I publish something that's on my thoughts. So LinkedIn is the best way to find me.
Yeah, as a founder in this company in 2006, you're coming up on 20 years in this business, man. Like no joke. As we know, very few companies make it five, let alone 20. And super successful business. And you kind of got started back in the Mosquito Keys down there in outside of Nicaragua there. And I mean, on $8,000, you and your partner each, and a prayer, and you're like, hey, this is going to be awesome. Your first year out, hey, $300,000. That felt probably like 10 million, right?
It felt like we hit Mount Everest, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Plus, it was doing something that I enjoy, being around the ocean, being around the sport fishing industry, going to tournaments. So it was an incredible start for sure.
Yeah, as you get into your business, um, you develop systems inside your business and really helps with your growth, your scaling. You've done this a long time. And then a lot due to your success, you decide like, wow, I could really pass the information I've gained along my way to others. And now you've become a coach.
Absolutely. So we started the business, like you said, in 2006. But from 2006 to, let's say, 2013, 2012, the business was hovering about around $1 million in revenue, right? And then in 2013, my partner, who's then working for a Coca-Cola bottling company, decided that he wanted to quit that job and come work in the business. And how do we grow this, right? How do we expand? Up to that point, we had pivoted from doing sport fishing bait, to catching commercial fish, snapper, yellowtail snapper that you get off the Florida Keys, where close to where you are. And we decided that we were going to, you know, aggressively grow that company, and we made several mistakes along the way. And in 2015, a couple of years after we grew the company from 1 million to 5 million, we crashed, and we were on the borderline being out of cash. And that's in that period of time. And coming out of that period is when I started developing those systems and processes that you're talking about, and what we do as Bloom Growth coaches. So the success of having implemented those systems and processes got me to be interested in doing that with other companies and other fellow entrepreneurs.
That is fascinating because, you know, when we talk about this, and I want to talk about, as we talk about the winners find a way, you know, people, we go through these ups and downs of positive experiences, negative experiences. Fortunately, they're relatively short term. You know, I am down, like you said today. I am in Florida today in lovely Boca Raton, and you know, down here with customers of Bloom Growth System, and meeting with a couple new potential customers that are looking to. We've struggled. We're tired of the ups and downs. We want consistency in our business, and we want predictability that we can visualize through our actions. And that system has prepared everybody so well for that. And man, you know, what you don't know. And when we talk about winners find a way, you know, we talk about, I love the quote, winners, when shown data that they're losing, find a way to win. In 2015, your partner's now left his corporate gig. He's now a big part, which means make more money. We got to support more lives, right?
Exactly.
And you guys have taken, you know, your boat's taken in water, right? Like, you guys are on a downturn. You're not building the revenue you need, and you slip into a level of depression that you never had any previous signs of. This has not been part of Ramiro's MO from the past. You faced other challenges. Walk us through what happened, and then how you guys navigated that 2015, you know, downturn.
So, like I said, we hadn't. The company was hovering around $1 million since like 2007 to 2012, and when my partner got in, we decided to aggressively grow the company. And instead of concentrating our resources in what made our economic engine grow, we mistakenly decided that we needed to diversify away from what our core business was. So we invested in shrimp farms. We opened a company in the US to sell our own fish, thinking that was going to be easy. We went into farming. We did peanuts, corn, all sorts of things that got us distracted from the main business. And in the process, we had raised about $1.2 million in financing and friends and family. And in 2015, there came a point where all those businesses or revenue streams that we diversified into were sucking cash to the company, to the point that we were almost getting out of cash. And I distinctly remember talking to my partner outside the offices and saying, we might make it to Thursday. We might make it to next Friday. How are we gonna? When are we gonna close?
Yeah.
And I fell into this pattern where I was focusing on the things that I couldn't control, and I was just not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And you know, after weeks and weeks of this pattern, I just found myself without the desire of getting up and going to work. And after weeks of this, one Monday, my wife came in and she had watched me already for, you know, 3-4 weeks of this. It was maybe a Monday at 11 a.m. You know, you're supposed to be at work, and I was there in bed, lying, just in a fetal position. And she came in and she said, you know, that's it. You know, get up. You need help. And I went to a psychiatrist and got the help I needed. But at the same time, I came across this book. and it was just out. It was like the first 6 months that was out, and I can't remember how I came across it, but when I read it, it clicked instantly. And that book, The Obstacles the Way, is about the Stoic philosophy, and I got deep into the Stoic philosophy and realized that I was focusing on the things that I couldn't control. I was staying busy just for the sake of being busy, like just doing things that weren't necessarily core to what I needed to do. And I was just acting out of emotion, not acting on data, not acting on facts. I was acting out of emotion of others or my own emotions. So when I found this philosophy, it sort of clicked a new way of thinking for me. And the first thing you mentioned something, winners find a way. You said, given the data, they find a way, something like that. You said, what was it that you said?
Yeah, winners when shown data that they are losing. Like, now I've shown you, like, so I always use the example, the scoreboard's a really easy one, right? Ramiro, like,
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
hey, here's the football game in Nicaragua, soccer for us,
Mhm.
and the score's 3-0. Like, listen, our team is not doing well. like this is not going the right direction. Now, in business, we have KPIs, we have all these data points, and we're like going, the easy one in business is always, well, we have $1 million in expenses this month, and we have $650,000 in revenue. Like, how is this going to work, right? Like, this isn't going to work. So
So
we've got to figure that out.
so how that philosophy helped me was one of the first disciplines of the Stoic philosophy is the discipline of perception, which in business I equate it to we all have judgments and perceptions of what's going on, right? And as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, what you need to do is get objective judgment of those perceptions. Your team, your leadership team has this perception of the obstacle or the opportunity that the business either needs to attack or the obstacle that the business needs to remove. So how do you get objective judgment around those perceptions, right? Data, facts, figures. And what was happening in my business is that we either weren't paying attention to the data, or we did not have the data to tell us before things happening. We didn't have leading indicators, we didn't have dashboards that were telling us we were going in the wrong direction until we hit a wall and we were out of cash.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point, because there's a lot of great lagging indicators, right? That we go, oh, hey, let's look at the end of the month. And what did we learn? Like, well, wait a minute, hold on. Like, while that's good, and it's always, great information to go back on, a leading indicator says, like, oh, when Ramiro makes 25 calls about a new supplier, 10 take an immediate meeting of advancing, like, hey, could we do the business and partner with you? 5 go to the next level and he presents to that team. 2 or 3 end up partnering with his company, and he knows now, hey, for every 25 calls I make, I can get 3 new distributing partners. And it's a leading indicator that if I will make the 25 calls, I will produce 3 partners. And so, this is how leading indicators predict our outcome of our business. And I love that. And I wanna stop here for a second and reiterate, the book is The Obstacle is the Way, right? You wanna hold that up again?
Yeah, the
And the
obstacles
author
away.
there?
Ryan Holiday.
Ryan Holiday. And Ryan just came down to the EO
Mm-hmm.
Fort Worth event called Eccentric
Eccentric, yeah.
and spoke. Did you attend that, Ramiro?
I did not, but I knew some of the people that were organizing, and I knew that Ryan was going to be there.
Yeah, I have another great client in using Bloom Growth System, an amazing property management company that's expanding rapidly and has a fabulous program running in a candidate program for all developing new leaders for all new buys that they're adding on in these bolt-on businesses in the trades. And it was one of the most influential books for him as well. That, coming up, going through challenges, we realized like how many times and how easy it is to get focused in on things that are totally out of our control. Like I could be totally saddened because the sun didn't come out today. And like, well, how am I going to change that tomorrow? When you live in Michigan in the winter, there's a good chance tomorrow the sun's not coming out. It's going to snow. And, like this is what's going to happen. So if you're banking your happiness on, or your income or anything else on things you get to have no control over, I could easily see how helpless a person could feel rapidly going, I don't have any control anymore. This whole thing is spinning out of my control and I'm not measuring the right things.
Exactly. And what you were saying about leading indicators perfectly coincides or reflects this that we were talking about. Focus what's in your control. So you can't control if you get the sale, you get the sale. You can control the efforts behind getting that sale. You can control how many calls you make. You can control all the efforts that you need to get that end result. So focusing on what you can control in the Stoic philosophy in business is focusing on leading indicators, which are effort-based measurements.
Yeah, let's talk about this because you really have changed. I mean, 2015. Since you guys have come out of this has been a pretty significant ramp, right? And talk to me about not only the business philosophy that's changed for you guys at De La Isla, but tell us about your life philosophy that's changed because of this.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always say is you can't control your emotions. You can't control if you feel sad. You can't control if you're mad. You can't control when you're happy. You can control how you respond when you're sad. You can control how you act when you're mad. So you can't control your thoughts, but you can control your actions towards your thoughts. And to me, that has been life changing because as entrepreneurs, we go through the ups and downs of all the externalities that are affecting your business, especially in the world where I'm from, in the third world country where there's a lot of vicissitudes that are not similar to what you would find in the US. You really have to have a mindset of focusing on the things that you can affect, that you can actually change, and not worry about the things that you can't change. And most of what you can change is your actions toward the things that happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things you make a great point here on this, and I love this. I love this, and I want to get deeper into this. Is there are challenges in that emotional intelligence, that IQ, to realize I'm really angry right now, and what's going to be my response, right, to that? And most of us never take that stop, never take that inventory of what's going on inside. It immediately gets extricated from our body in all sorts of bad ways, in poor language, in poor communication, in aggression, in discouragement of others. Like it comes out very poorly often. And just as in sadness, this came out for you in a negative way, like, oh well, I'm going to go internal, and this is how I'm going to decide. I'm going to decide to stay in bed. I'm going to decide to, this is how I'm going to react to this sadness, and recognizing I am sad. And now I do love the philosophy by the kite guys. There's a father and a son who have this thing called E plus R equals O. And there's an event that happens, and then there's a response to that event,
Mm.
and then there's an outcome. You don't get to control the event. The event happens. It snows 12 inches. You have 30-foot seas. Like whatever the event happens. But what's our response to that? Do we bring the vessels in? Do we, try to weather the storm? Do we try to oh, hey, we should have the beach party with 12 inches of snow? I probably don't think that's the right response. And so we get an outcome based on that response. And I don't think emotions are very much different. There's an event, it triggers an emotion. Now I'm angry. How do I respond will now determine what that next outcome is. And this is probably, as I watch, I'm both big sports fans, Ramiro, and as I watch these athletes, I'm just asking them, these professional athletes making millions of dollars, please have some poise. Please have some ability to go, oh, you know what? Ramiro shoved me after the whistle, so I'm going to punch him in his mask, and then my team takes a flag, like in the most important part of the game, there was an event, and my response is pride, arrogance, anger, retaliation. And what's the outcome? The team loses the game because the penalty takes you out of position, and you can't recover from this response. And I
But
don't.
I think there's something before you act, before the response that you have to do to get
Yes,
this, to
let's
get
talk about
better
that.
at this.
Let's talk about that.
And it goes back to the discipline of perception, right? If I show you this class, you might say it's half full or half empty, right?
Yep. Yep.
And that we're putting a judgment on that. Half full, it's a judgment. Half empty, it's a judgment. What would be objective is say, this class is such and such centimeters or inches. It's at 4 inches high.
Yeah.
There's no
This is a
judgment.
16-ounce glass of water, and there's 8 ounces of water in it.
Exactly. There's no judgment of good and bad on it. So if something happens to you and you refrain yourself from assigning a judgment of good and bad, it prepares you to act differently. It just is like for example, right now in our business, right? We depend 90%, 95% of everything we sell is wild caught. We depend on the ocean with everything that's going on with climate change. One of our main items is mahi. I'm sure you're eating mahi at restaurants,
Love it.
and we buy about 3.5, 4 million pounds of this fish a year. And this year, the fish has been absent. There hasn't been any fish, right? And I could go and say, this is a bad situation, and just, feel bad for my company that this is happening. But this isn't good or bad. It's just the way it is, And what are we going to do to prepare ourselves for this event that's happening right now? And how do we get something good out of it? In the sense that when this turns around, we'll have another revenue stream that we didn't have before. Or if it's something that's going to be permanent, we're going to be already prepared for it. And I'm looking at it as an opportunity where our business can become better because of this obstacle. So not putting a judgment on the event that's happening to you is kind of the first step.
I believe the first time I ever read, I think there's this Chinese proverb, right? Like this Chinese tale of, the farmer, right?
Mm-hmm.
The farmer, and something happens, and hey, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, and he says, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, your son's broken his leg. He's not going to be able to work for you. Is that good or bad? Maybe. I don't know. Oh, now they're coming through the villages. They're collecting all the young men. My young man has a broken leg. He's not going to be able to go to war. Is that good? Bad? Maybe. Like, we don't know the outcome of things, right? Like, and I think I read that originally in The Obstacle is the Way. I think it's featured in the book.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
think so too. I can't remember, but I think so too. And speaking about myself, at the time when we went through this crisis in my company, I thought it was the worst thing in the world.
Of course. Yeah.
And now that I look back on it, it's the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah.
The best thing that ever happened to us, because it's got us into the systems that we both know, and it got us to looking at data. It got us to making decisions based on data. It got us on taking action towards things that are connected to our purpose, and it got us thinking on the stuff that we needed to do to achieve that purpose instead of just following the shiny objects that are thrown to you every day. So I'm really grateful that we went through this back then and not now.
Yeah, it's always interesting, right? It's back to it's back to that. I'm a Christian man, and so I read the Bible, and I read James. Consider it all joy, these trials, and you're like, "But what are you talking about joy? We're out of cash. We're not going to be able to pay our people on Thursday. Like, what do you mean joy? Like, and it tells the tale. It's shaping you. It's making you. And I don't know how many people, Ramiro, have told me about these things and challenges they've had to overcome, which of course felt like the worst things in their lives in the moment: bankruptcy, workouts with the bank, losing their parents' company, you name it. And they were like, wow, best thing that ever happened to me. I learned what was important to me. I learned what I truly valued. I learned what I needed to measure to be better the next time. This shaped me. I got the lesson, right? I got the lesson from this horrible trial I had to go through. And, I'm always a well-read, educated guy who thinks like, man, I should see it before it's coming. I pour guilt on myself. Like, how did I miss that? How did I miss that and get us in a situation that is uncomfortable, could be, potentially, closing a business or whatever the case. And man, it's pretty easy to take a wrong turn. Is that fair?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it reminds me of you were talking about the book, and one of the passages that struck me the most is the passage of James Stockdale, the famous U.S. the highest ranking U.S. officer that got you know in prison in the Vietnam War, and he talks about this paradox about how he throughout his imprisonment he had faith that he was going to persevere regardless of the difficulties, but at the same time he was realistic to confront the brutal facts that were on the ground, that he was not going to get out soon, that they were going to torture him, that he was going to be put through all these major difficulties. So holding those two opposing views, I think, is key as an entrepreneur and as a person, where you can hold two opposing views in your head and still function.
And
That's
both of those,
the
and
key
both of
of a
those,
leadership.
yeah, and both of those can be true at the same time.
Yes, yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about your pivot to coaching.
Mhm.
I mean, you really grasped on to the controllables, to making high quality decisions based on the right data. I tell a lot of organizations, a lot of people, if you want the right answers, we have to be asking the right questions. And whether that's what KPI should we be measuring, what kind of employee do we need, what are the key elements of these employees that are going to make us successful and be a major contributor. Because Ramiro, you and I have both had people on our teams that haven't been fabulous contributors, and I recognize like how many times I hired for the wrong things. I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't hire the skill sets that I needed in contribution or the attitude or whatever it was. And I put somebody in a position that probably wouldn't be successful. And while unfortunately that ends poorly, um, it could have been prevented. We were not thoughtful about and as owners, we have to own that responsibility of getting that right. And that
Absolutely.
is not something to be taken lightly. And it's really hard for me as I've been coaching a long time, as we put so much money, so much time, effort, energy into getting the right players in professional sports, right? And Ramiro, you see the results, like we miss all the time. You see it on the commentary, like, oh my gosh, we thought Clark was going to be amazing. He was a total bust. Like, you're like, wow, I felt like I was okay, but like, you miss. And we think we're doing it right. But man, and then I see organizations who spend very little time trying to get this right and understanding who they need, what they're going to need from that person, communicating that
It's it,
responsibility of how they make that contribution.
it's interesting you say that. I believe that the most successful companies are those that make those hard decisions about their leadership team. I have this particular client of mine that I've coached since 2021. They're a company in the food space industry. They do ingredients for animal feed, right?
Oh,
And the operator of the business and the owner of the business are relentless about having the right people on their team. And when I started with them in 2021, they had a what they called a leadership team, and there's none of those characters are there anymore from when we started. And the hard decisions that they had to make, they made them quick
yeah,
when they knew that they didn't have the right people on the leadership team. Because as we say, as the leadership team goes, the company goes. And before I've learned about the systems, I thought that this was something from like NASA, how to get the right people on the right seats, how to do a proper interview. And the truth of the matter is that there's simple things that you need to do. You know, getting the right scorecard on that person, asking the right questions on the interview, which is something that we both do for our clients, are just very simple things that you can do to have the right people on your team.
yeah. It I always say to people, it's very simple. It's not easy,
It's not easy. It's
right?
not easy.
It's
If
it's
it was easy, everybody would do it.
That's right. That's right. If it were easy, we would all be killing it at this.
Yeah.
And I think, it's also a two-way street. Um, People are desperate for work. Oh, I could probably do what they're asking me. I don't know if I'm actually qualified, but I need the work and I'll take it. And then the other side is like, listen, we need someone in to fill a gap. And, you know, he may not be Mr. Right, but he's Mr. Right now. And we're going to put him in. And that becomes sometimes the peril of our teams, because we got someone in there like, hey, man, we didn't take the patience, we didn't look hard at that, and I think that most people that are are eliminated from a position in an organization, they know before the leadership team knows that they're not knocking it out of the park. They're not performing at some of the levels that their colleagues are. They see what other people are doing and realizing, wow, others are making much bigger contributions around here than I am. And I feel like I'm playing from behind, which immediately causes a real lack of quality of life, because who wants to be subpar and not performing and contributing where they're at?
And if you don't remove that person, you're doing a disservice to that person, because that person might work and fit in another company and be able to knock it out of the park. It's just that you have to have the persons that are fit for you, and that has to do with the core values of your company. If that person is not, you know, breeding and leaving those core values that you have in your company, he might as well go to another company and might thrive, but he's not going to thrive in your company. So you're doing a disservice to that person by keeping him on.
I think that's exactly right. I think that you really struck a chord on core values, right? Because when someone agrees with your values and you're operating an organization based on these foundational fabrics of what we truly believe, and that it's easy for me to get aligned with folks if we're all marching to the same beat and we all agree with each other how we're going to treat one another, what's important around here, how do we make that contribution, how do we show up as contributors inside this organization, and how do we do this really well together. And skill sets can be learned again and again, and I've seen many organizations take a person who has all the core values and say, I've put you in a seat that I don't think you're going to be successful for, so I'm moving you to a different department because we love who you are, we love how you show the values, and we think this skill set actually is better suited for you to be successful and be a better contributor for our organization, give you more confidence. And this is something that's always happening. And Ramiro, I think on the other side of that, of elimination, I don't know how many times I've eliminated people in my organization to watch their shoulders drop 3 inches of just the stress and anxiety of carrying the weight of underperforming and realizing this isn't my God-given strength. I probably need to be over here where I understand engineering and I understand that and I have a passion for that. I moved into the sales to make more money, and it just hasn't worked out the way I have. Maybe I'm a process person and this is where I should be. And like, yeah, this is what you really went after. And there was a reason for that back in the
But
day. And so,
but I'll give you a different view on that.
okay, good.
Not only underperformers, because you can have the best performer and still not be aligned with your core values.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened to me once. I had we like you said, we operate boats in the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua, and I had what I thought back then was the best mechanic, naval mechanic, marine mechanic in Central America. And he was just terrible dealing with the human resources that we had there. He created chaos. There was a lot of animosity. The atmosphere in our Blue Fuels operation was just terrible. And I neglected that for years. I mean, years. And that ended up in managers quitting and quitting and quitting until one day I sort of learned the hard way. This is a great performer, but he doesn't breathe and leave our core values. He has to go.
Yep.
And when we remove that person, magically that operation just exploded in growth. And we found other mechanics that were just as good, you know.
Yeah. Let me put myself. Let me insert myself in that role. Let's just play this out, folks, for everyone listening. Ramiro has Trent, who's this fabulous mechanic, but he is a constantly pain and creating havoc with poor relationships, not sharing the values of the organization. Numbers of complaints are coming to Ramiro, and I want to play this from an ownership standpoint, because I know so many of you listening are owners, want to be owners, you want to be running these organizations, and the first 6 months, the rest of the organization is holding Trent in contempt. Those managers are like, that's not okay for you to treat people like that. This is not how we do things, Trent. Trent is being a jerk. Now, after 6 months of complaining and these managers, what happens is they get fed up that the manager, the owner, the boss hasn't done something about it. So what's happened here, and you can tell me different, Ramiro, but the blame and the contempt shifted from Trent to Ramiro.
Yep,
Because now
absolutely.
it's your responsibility and you are not doing anything. And so since you're not doing anything, I'm leaving.
Or if the leader doesn't care about the core values because he's not willing to enforce them on the mechanic, why should I follow those core
I
values?
don't have to follow the core values because I'm not going to be fired or
Yeah.
apparently. And the moment Ramiro running this fabulous organization takes someone out and says, listen, you haven't showed the core values that's expected here. That's unacceptable.
What
The
about Trent?
argument immediately is like, you don't do it for Trent.
Because he's
What
a good
happened?
performer.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So this is something, I think people gloss over these core values like there's these are things, and I love the back in the day, there was these 10 core values of Zappos, the shoe company
Okay, yeah. The
out of Las
principles.
Vegas. And
Yeah.
they were put into a book, and it was a big, the culture, and I love the philosophy of these things we don't just believe are core values. These are non-negotiables for us. These are all any any trespass of our core values is subject to termination. Now, that didn't say, hey, Ramiro will fire Trent if he trespasses. It's subject to that. So now we're talking about levels of like, hey, does he need to be trained and learn that that's not our way? We don't do things here. You may have been able to do that in another organization. Our core values say it's this way, and anything beyond that, we feel like you stepped across a line, Trent, and it's not okay. Then there's the whoa, you're so far across the line, you're immediately fired. like that's it. Like you cannot tell our customers to F off or just say something terrible, right? And that is punishable by termination, right? So, but they set that and they backed it up with money. They said, listen, not only after like I think it was a 2-week training program, and after the first week, they've hammered home the culture and the values and said, listen, we are at a point of agreement that if you are moving forward now, you are going to operate and contribute under our core values going forward, and you're signing off on that. And if you're not comfortable with that, we really respect that, and we're giving you $5,000 to leave toward your next opportunity because we've taken time and we want to pay you for your week, and we want to give you an opportunity because they realize that $5,000 investment saved them $500,000 in retraining and recruiting and legal issues down the road for someone who refuses to follow the core values of the organization.
That's incredible. I've never
Incredible.
heard that story.
And it seems so simple, right? Shouldn't we all be doing this? Well, you and I both know most people aren't sitting around training going, I've got an extra $5,000 to, no, listen, their methodology is solid. It's a 5 to 7 interview process. If we don't know by the time we've done 5 or 7 interviews that we don't have the right person in the room, we screwed this up anyway, right? So I'm
Absolutely.
sure the percentage of people who opted out at that point are probably less than 10%. But I think it's still a reliability that what I love about it is 3 months down the road, it's an accountability factor because the moment I butt up against one of those foundational culture values, core values, they're going, whoop, Trent, 90 days ago, you signed an agreement that said you were going to uphold this. I mean, it's instant accountability. And we made an agreement and you signed it. So it's not like it's in question whether this is okay or not. It's not okay. And so I think what a way to establish that system inside of how we're getting the right people. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I always say that the core values are basically what are the behaviors that repeatedly are going to make your culture work. And most companies already have those behaviors in. They just haven't found a way to put them in a concise in 3 or 5 elements that they can name and use and use their language around to call out those behaviors when they're doing it great and when they're not doing it great. So think about what are those characteristics or repeated behaviors that you want in your company, or that's happening in your company, that makes a good culture.
Yeah, I think like right now, this today, we have this brilliant level of AI to help. And I have done this for a number of clients where we sat down our core values and I hammer it down. And then I'm like, let's list the 20 behaviors of what they look like. And then we shape this thing into an AI that spits out 10 words or less. What are we trying to say? Right. And it's like, we can get 3 examples of that and everyone goes, yeah, that sounds about pretty close. And then tweak a couple words that may be industry specific to us or something around our culture or in our country or wherever we're at, right? The other thing I think is really important when you're talking about core values is to start accumulating stories of people showing the core value you're looking for. That's very specific to you, your organization, your team members, and go, oh, this one time, Ramiro, I couldn't believe Sally. When we talk about our core value of going the extra mile, Sally had just given birth to a child a month before, working from home. She worked an entire weekend through her feeding schedule for her child, this and that, to help us get this RFP. During her maternity leave, she was a key element to the customer. She'd been their point of contact for 15 years, and she was just instrumental. And she did not have to do that. She was on leave with her baby, but that is just our example of how Sally changed things for our organization and how we go the extra mile. And everyone's, whoa, wow, you guys got an incredible organization. Like, yes,
Yeah,
we
I
do
always
have
told
incredible people.
my clients that you need either a story, an analogy, or an example of your core value in action,
Yeah.
and the same, a story, analogy, or an example of your core value not being followed.
Mm. So let
Both.
me show you what it looks like, and let me show you what it doesn't look like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the pro and anti core value here,
Mhm.
like this is our anti core value, right?
Yeah.
I think that's good because unfortunately, we do accumulate many stories of how it's not supposed to look, right?
Yeah. And the more you use the language of your core values in your everyday interactions with everybody in your company, the more those core values are going to be embedded in the DNA of personnel and all the employees in the companies. And I always say you need to get that language down on an everyday basis. So if you're congratulating someone, you're congratulating based on those values, on that language. If you're giving feedback, you're referring to that language. For example, one of our core values in De La Isla is accountability. So we're always referring when somebody's accountable and was self-accountable for something and said, I'm accountable for delivering this and I didn't do it, I messed up, I'm raising my hand and this is what I'm going to do to make it better. We're praising that and we're calling it out every time. Either that was an exhibition of core value or it was an anti-core value, like you said right now.
I love this. Let's pivot for a minute because I love this conversation, but I also want to talk about how you go from a depressed systems, implementing it, coming out of this 2015 deal, and now, less than 6 years later, you have now a thriving business inside a system where everything's very well communicated and executed on point with one of your core values of full accountability, prioritizing the right things. And you're like, I should coach people how we've done this. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, in 2018, there was civil unrest here in Nicaragua.
Yes.
that there was like a mini civil war, not all out civil war, but to give you an idea, we had 3 months of the country just stopped. There was roadblocks everywhere, and about 300 people got killed on the streets. So I sent my family for a period of time to Florida, to Miami, and it got me thinking. All our business is in Nicaragua. What what's going to happen if the sovereign risk of the country? What's going to happen if this drags on? And I had gone to EMP in EO, which is a program EO has at MIT that's sort of gets you to start looking at all these systems and processes about people, strategy, cash, execution, and I stumbled across one of the systems, and it was the system called Bloom Growth. And I started the software. It's funny, when I joined in the software in late 2017, early 2018, I get a call from our good friend Isaiah. He's like, "Are you in Nicaragua?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're like the first person who joined the system in Nicaragua." And we started hiring a facilitator to facilitate our sessions. And I fell in love with the system to the point where I wanted to do it myself. And one of my forum mates said, "I think you're a natural for this. I want you to do it for my company." And I did it for his company. And then all of a sudden, he's the biggest law firm in Central America. There are in 5 countries. And then he told somebody else, and he told somebody else. And all of a sudden, I had 4 or 5 clients on my hands. And that coincided for me with me facilitating for the Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm a strategy summit facilitator since 2019, and traveling to chapters in the US and Latin America to facilitate their strategy for their EO year. So that's how I got into that. It was sort of not pivot, but I would say it was sort of like a second option or a fallback that I had if something happened in Nicaragua, and it grew on its own. In the pandemic, it just grew to the point where I'm dedicating now about 40% of my professional energy towards coaching entrepreneurs and their leadership team in the U.S. and Latin America.
Well, it's pretty exciting because as the president-elect of EOS Michigan, I'm thinking Ramiro Saborio is going to be my
I'm there.
strategy
You're the
summit guy
president-elect
coming up in June.
Michigan? You are? Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So when we talk about this, man, being able to pass that along to others and having that impact of people seeing what you don't just talk it as I don't, we walk it. And let me just tell you, fans, a little bit about Ramiro Saborio. Like, he has this large conglomerate firm now, yet all the skills, all the coaching, he hires a coach to work with his company. He's not saying, "Oh, I'm going to run mine." He puts himself back in the role of founder, of the role of, I think you're the CEO, right?
Yes.
And so you go into that role and you're just one of the board members for your meeting. You're working through your system through
I'm a part of the
your personal coach.
Yes, because you know what happens? If you're facilitating your own company, you're emotionally involved, and you can't really facilitate when you're emotionally involved. It's hard to facilitate a session when your emotions are in play. And how are the emotions not going to be in play when you're a company?
Yeah. And folks, this is probably, and I never discourage anybody from lifelong learning. I never discourage from self-implementation. There's a lot of things you can do. What I think Ramiro just said, and I believe in this, is that there's a ceiling to self-implementation because the emotional factor will come in. You can bring systems in, you can bring a lot of things in, but people will say and do things with a mediator, with a coach, with a guide that they will not say to the ownership, that they will not do inside an internal room, not knowing the ramifications of that long term. And there's some self-sustainability, self-preservation there. But it will not happen. So I applaud you, Ramiro, for taking that step in humility, because recognizing that most folks don't. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And I always tell people it's not every day where you have a third party who can facilitate a difficult conversation. So having that facilitator there, enables people to come out and be honest and open, and uh, have the vulnerability to say the things that they need to say.
I love it. I love it. Listen, for everybody, thank you for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. We go live. And of course, weekly, our show drops on Friday on all the major networks, including your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the latter. We are a top 2%, 100,000 download a month on the Winners Find a Way show. Check it out. Go buy my book, Leading Winning Teams. We have that now in all the three different genres of the hardcover book, the digital book, e-read book, and of course now on Audible. So super excited about that launch just a few weeks ago. Ramiro, tell them again when they can find you and any final words.
They can find me on LinkedIn, at Ramiro Saborio. And I appreciate the time, Trent. I really enjoyed the show. And I encourage everybody to establish a cadence of rhythm where they can stop every 3 months and have a bird's eye look over the business and plan for the future.
Yes, yeah, that is the key philosophy of the Bloom Growth System and Bloom Growth Coach that both Ramiro and I both implement for a lot of organizations. If you're looking for an implementer today, you're going to want to talk to one of us and get out there and get going. There is never a wrong time to start this. I'm telling you, I'm telling folks, it will have immediate impact. Ramiro and I have probably seen some of the greatest things on day one of these organizations that
Absolutely.
finally pull that trigger, right, Ramiro?
Yep. Yep.
Incredible. So for
Transformation.
everybody, thank you so much for joining us on the Winners Find a Way show. We will see you next time as Winners Find a Way.